This is step 2 of building an electric Wild One trike. In this step, we'll assemble the rear wheel and install it on the trike. Okay, let's put the cluster on. Here's the cluster itself. The axle's a beefy thing with flat sides so that the torque arm can keep it from spinning. I assume the assembly is in proper order. There's a nut, lock washer, lodge washer, washer with key to keep it from spinning, and a thick washer, and then what I believe to be a standard threaded receiver for the cluster. There's a fixture here that I hope takes a standard bike part that should allow me to thread things on and tighten it without a chain tool. Hopefully it's just a matter of sliding it on and threading it. And there we go. The threads seem to have caught, spinning up nicely, spinning in nicely. And it is now hand tight. I think I'm going to need to use a tool to tighten it a little bit further. Let me go get that. Okay, well, it turns out I don't actually have the right freewheel tool for this. Not a big issue because I actually don't need it when installing it, although if I ever take one out, ever take it off, I will need one. So it's not an immediate problem. So that being the case, I'll put the various washers and bits back in the order that I took them off and thread the nut back on. Now at this point, the wheel should be ready to install on the bike. So the next step, I suppose, is to get the bike in, take the existing wheel off, and put this wheel on. So we'll do that next. We'll need the table, so I'll take the this wheel off, clean the table off, and load the bike up. Okay, here's the work table, and let me set it up and put the bike on it, put the bike on stands, and then we can install the wheel. First thing is to put this bit of kit on. Doesn't look like much, but it turns out the trike wheels are just a bit wider than the table, and so this makes the table a little bit wider. These blocks keep the wheels from rolling off while I'm working on the bike if it's not on the stand. The process is pretty simple. I lift the rear wheel onto the table. It just barely fits without dragging the front. And then it's a question of grabbing the front, lifting it, and rolling the trike onto the table, lifting the wheels between the two stops. It's about that simple. Once the bike is on the table, it looks like this. At this point, I can bring the rear wheel up off the table with this small stand that's been made and canted slightly. And bingo, we're ready to work. I'm thinking about what has to be done. I'm going to have to mount some sensors on the front of the trike. So I'll go ahead and prop up the front wheels, put the front wheels on stands as well. It's a pretty simple process. And of the various things I've tried, this table and these stands really work better than anything else. Okay, now we're good to go. The existing rear wheel has got a quick release. It's also got a disc brake. For the moment, I'm not going to put the disc brake on. It's used only as a parking brake. In order for this to work properly, I'm going to need to change or want to change the engagement lever for this brake, because I really don't like the way it's working. So let's pull this off. I put some gloves on, since this tends to be a little messy, and the wheel will fall out apparently. And at that point it's just a question of lifting the bike off and getting the wheel off the chain, and we're done. Wheels off. Simple enough. Now it's a question of putting the new one on. The new one should go on pretty easily, since it doesn't have a rear brake on it. Of course, it's an awful lot heavier than the other wheel. Okay, we're going to need to take the extra bits off. So I'll take the nut, the lock washer, large washer. I believe this is a torque washer. And I think the next washer in should stay on. Now on this side, we're going to need to take everything off again. Well, that's going to take a wrench. I'll grab one and we'll go from there. Okay, I'm going to use an open-end wrench on this thing. Assuming that it's not overly tight. This doesn't really want to seem to come off. Let's see what's going on here. Well, there it seems to go. It's probably just a little bit stiff. Okay, so the order is the nut, so it's a nut, a lock washer, a big washer, the protecting ring, and then the anti-torque ring. So I think to make things simple, I'm going to back all this stuff out about as far as I can without actually unthreading it completely. And at this point, it should be a matter of putting it on the bike. Now before I do that, I'm going to go check the torque arm directions. Make sure that I understand how the torque arm goes on. Okay, I'm not entirely sure the torque arm is necessary. The directions indicate that most rear axles are strong enough to not need one. That being the case, notwithstanding that, I think I'm going to go ahead and put one on. Better safe than sorry. There's no real indication as to which side it ought to go on. So let me take a look and see how it fits on either side. Torque arm is in two parts. A part that engages the axle. That's this bit. It can be turned around to position it in a variety of ways. And part that carries the force from the torque arm up into the frame. So it looks like this could be installed here, and then, oh, something like, doesn't look too encouraging. Maybe if I turn it this way, here, and no, that's not even going to fit either. Here. This isn't going to work. Well, it's a good thing I don't absolutely have to have the torque arm, because I really don't think it's going to fit. So we'll install the wheel without it. I'm not particularly concerned about not having a torque arm, since the Wild one, I'm pretty sure, was designed by people that in the previous life probably designed tanks or something like that. It's pretty heavily built. So, let's see if it'll go on. Shouldn't be a question of just slipping it under here. Looping the chain around. Lifting. You can watch as I fight with gravity and see gravity win. I struggled with this for about 8 minutes before deciding to prop up the wheel. Okay, well, the wheel is heavy enough that it's a bit awkward to handle. I think what I'll do is prop the wheel up from the bottom, which should make it a little bit easier to maneuver the frame to drop down onto the wheel. Let's see if I have any better luck with that. Okay, the wheel's up. Now, gravity should be working for me. I don't have to support the weight of the wheel. There's one side in, but not the other one. This is going to fit. It will be very, very close. Okay, it looks like the axle dropout is not quite wide enough to accept the thicker axle on the hub motor. So a little bit of filing is going to be called for. Apparently that's a thing that happens. Won't take much, maybe a millimeter or a bit less. Kind of hard to say. I don't think adjusting the angle of the axle flats changes anything. Well, maybe it does actually. No. Apparently it does change things a little bit. The right side dropped in, and the other side dropped in. And it looks like everything is now in. The axle's not fully seated. Let's take a look at that up close. Okay, so here's where things stand right now. There's about a 2 millimeter space between the top of the axle thread and the existing dropout. It appears that the axle thread has a somewhat larger diameter than the dropout, so that it's getting set, or it's getting stopped from sliding all the way off by the larger thread. I don't think that's a problem. Now, that having been said, I'm not sure. It's Monday. I tried to call Grin, and unfortunately they don't open until Tuesday. So I think for the moment what I'm going to do is install it as it is. And then I'll give them a call tomorrow, because this, if I install it as it is, it will allow me to go ahead and do the wiring and perhaps a little test ride. Then I'll give them a call tomorrow. If there's an issue, I can drop the wheel out, do the filing that's necessary, and then proceed from there. So that's the plan. Let's see what happens. Okay, so that's the rear wheel on. With any luck, I should be able to drop it and still pedal, and the trike should still go. So let's take it off the blocks. And see if we can pedal. Okay, looks like I can get to most of the gears, but not the innermost gear. It's probably a derailleur adjustment issue. Let's get to that big gear. Yeah, the derailleur is definitely out of adjustment. I've lost my lowest gear. Big chain ring on the rear. Not cool. But we'll see what can be done to adjust it. Worst it comes to is I have to play with the cluster. Not a great big issue. That's the rear wheel installed and ready to be used. Time to move on to step 3, installing the battery and the controller.